You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. Music N Mavens has returned to the Rady JCC this week after a short hiatus, and the first musical selection is a presentation that has become synonymous with Paul McCartney's post-Beatles work, Band on the Run, his most successful album with Paul McCartney and Wings. We'll hear it performed by Erin Propp Thursday afternoon. First, she's joined me in the Classic 107 studio. Good morning. Thanks for being here, Erin.
Good morning, Simon. Thanks for having me.
All right, so lots to talk about when it comes to this iconic album, one that came out just over a half century ago, which is almost hard to believe, but the math checks out. 1973 this was released.
Yes.
Last year, as part of Jazz Winnipeg's Spirit of 73 series, you had the opportunity to perform this album in full. I want to begin by asking, there were a lot of iconic albums that came out in 73.
Yes.
What made you settle on Band on the Run?
Excellent question, because it's true. So many great records came out that year, and artists that who I put the program with together with at that time was Larry Roy, artists that both of us love and that we've covered over time. But specifically 1973, when we looked through a bunch of different records together, which one do we want to cover? Larry said, you know, Erin, this was the album that me and my friends were listening to. And he was a young teenager at the time. So I said, you get priority in choosing this. You know what was out and what maybe meant something really to you at that time. And so we went with Band on the Run. He said that was popular with his friends.
That's a good way to go. I mean, play the tracks that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
I was just kind of scrubbing through the list myself, and I remember, there were a number of others that were covered, like Vox Populi did Intervisions,
right.
The Stevie Wonder album, and then Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, Apollo Visions did that, or Apollo Suns did that. But then also like Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin, and then there was David Bowie released an album that year, Album Sane, and Al Green Call Me, and Bob Marley's Burnin'. I mean, there are some really iconic albums that came out in 73.
Yeah, I think there was it Piano Man that came out that year too? Like there was a big Billy Joel record that came out. Yeah, it was huge. Really, we probably would have we were looking for Joni Mitchell, but it was like 72 and 74.
Yeah,
so
just missed it.
Just a hot bunch of years. And those were years when these famous artists, these like really, really excellent songwriters were putting out records almost every year. So much to choose from. Yeah. So,
just thinking about Paul McCartney in terms of his post-Beatles work, you mentioned Larry was a fan. Are you a big listener to Paul McCartney and Wings?
Okay, I hope I don't lose people over this, but it's not a matter of me not being a fan. It's just a matter of there's only so much music you can listen to.
Very understandable.
Only so much you can get into. So I did once hang out with some people that were really into the Beatles for a long time. So I got into their work, and I grew up listening to KY58, tons of oldies. So with my dad, so I was very familiar with a lot of early Beatles work, but then post Beatles, Paul McCartney. No, I'd heard a couple of the tracks from that record, but not that I knew them. So this was new to me. I can tell you, Simon, though, I'm a fan of this album. Yes, now I am.
That was exactly my next question. So then let me follow up with this in short, because we're going to get to this in just a little bit, but what makes you a fan of this album now that you've really had the opportunity to dig in and spend time with the tracks?
The songs come across as intuitive when you hear them. Like they go where the ear wants it to go. But when you look at it on paper, if you've spent time charting the music, it doesn't look like it's going to go where you want it to go, if that makes sense. Like it's hard to follow the form of it. Like Band on the Run, the song itself, is 3 songs in one. But with hearing it at face value, you think, of course, naturally, with every turn, you go, great. But then trying to learn that as the artist behind the microphone or behind the instrument, that's another story. So that's really amazing as a songwriter myself, to see that process and to see how difficult it is to make something that is so complex sound so simple.
This was really the first commercial and critical success for Paul McCartney and Wings. I think they had 2 albums before this.
I think so. I think I read that as well.
And I mean, again, this predates me. And so it's one of those albums that, I remember hearing the title track. I remember hearing Jet. But once you really dive into it, I mean, this is an album that they recorded in Nigeria, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit more on that? Like, can you kind of hear the influence in terms of the location of where this was recorded? Or like, I'm even just thinking like there's a lot of cool instrumentation that goes on throughout the album because I was kind of listening through it in prep for this this interview.
There's a lot of vocals. I wouldn't say call and response necessarily, but just about Mamunia sounds like that a lot of the time. There's a Guido in there. There's something that sounds like someone's playing a glass. We use a glass on stage to get the effect that we hear on the record. And they were working with apparently the studio situation wasn't great. They had to re-record a lot of stuff back in the UK. So I'm sure that it was using what they had in the moment to make it work.
Now, I'm curious about that. I mean, you're a mainstay in the Manitoba music scene here, a Juno nominee, a WCMA winner. We, of course, hear your voice over the Classic 107 airwaves during the evening jazz programming. Yours is such an effortless sound. How does it feel to tackle Paul McCartney? I mean, it's Sir Paul. How do you navigate this?
Well, I don't let that get to me, the Sir Paul notoriety, and I guess I could. Now I'll go home and fret over that.
I'm so
Thanks
sorry.
a lot, Simon.
Yeah, my bad.
It's okay. I have lots of time to worry about it between now and Thursday. Yes, also just as a female vocalist and not as typically as a rock singer. But really, I think how I tackle it is with a lot of joy. It is a lot of fun to sing this material. We pop everything into a key that works for me, and I get to explore a different part of my voice that people probably have never heard. Yeah, unless you were a fly on the wall in my living room. This is a new sound for me. It's super fun.
All the more reason to be there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, can you tell us about the band that you've assembled? Because it isn't the same group of players as you had come together for the Jazz Winnipeg show, right?
That's right. It's just one change. The big one is Larry Roy, the juggernaut. But he's away all month. And so originally when we did this show, Larry was handling guitars, and then Casey Kurtz, a wonderful guitarist singer in Winnipeg, was handling guitar and keys. So now we're having Casey just on guitars, and we've hired Carter Graham, just a wonderful local piano player and songwriter. You can hear him with his band Vox Populi. Carter's handling keys for this. And so it's adding a little bit of a different sound as well, because then we could have someone dedicated to the piano for the show. So that's great. And then on top of that, we've got Casey Kurtz on vocals, guitars, Carter Graham on piano and keys, Carl Kohut, the great Carl, on bass, Carly Epp on percussion and vocals, Joyce German on percussion, vocals, and tenor saxophone, and then myself on vocals and percussion.
Yeah, it should be a great show.
Yeah.
And this a midday concert. I mean, this is the Music and Mavens thing, right?
Yeah.
It happens at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Certainly a little unusual, a unique experience. Are you looking forward to singing midway through the day?
Yeah, it's a great change from the 9 o'clock in the evening kind of a show where you wait all day to get there. It's nice to have it midday. I have kids myself, and I would take them out of school for this. I would do it. There's another Music and Mavens event that I'm going to take my kids out of school for. So I highly recommend the 2 p.m. gig for the musician.
Yeah, and why not play a little bit of hooky, right? Bring the kids to the show. It should be a good one, a different sort of educational experience. And it sounds like if you don't already have your tickets, you're kind of out on the luck, because there's only going to be a few tickets available at the door. It's already sold out online. You should be playing for a great crowd.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in this morning to tell us a little bit about the show, Erin.
You're
Great
welcome.
connecting.
Thanks for having me, Simon.